Hey all, it's Jan of the Jan Files. I hope you're well. I hope you had a wonderful time protesting this weekend, as I did. And I also wanted to remind you to support my YouTube channel. That's really important to me. So I'm not going to make this a long one, but I want to talk about protesting because I've heard a lot of people say it doesn't make a difference. It's performative. At the end of the day, what's the result? Well, you need to look to our history in one way to understand the result. We protested in during the Revolutionary War. We did so again during the Vietnam War. We and the Civil Rights Movement. It made a difference, and you may not understand that because either you weren't there or you just feel like it's useless. It's just like a bunch of people gathering, and what does it do? It's something called energy. There is a lot of energy behind these protests, and we are feeling it, and it is real. Now, it doesn't mean that everything's just going to change overnight, but it is part of standing up. It is part of speaking out. It is part of saying, no, we are not going to allow this to happen to our country. And, I know, there are people on both sides of this equation that say it doesn't make a difference. It does. I don't think it's important to honestly get into an argument over this. I think that those who feel it doesn't. Okay, fine. But those of us who know better, and I do say know better, because when you're there, you experience the energy of it. And I also know, and this is part of the conversation, but that a lot of Black people are not on those front lines in that way in terms of protest because they live on the front lines, right? They know that if the cops are going to come into a group of people, that they're the first ones that are going to be compromised. It's not going to be people that look like me, right? It's going to be people that look like them. And so in this context of this, all that is happening right now, I think it's really important, especially for people that look like me, to stand up and speak out and say no more. And it's just part of the process of change. We see what's happening. We actually can see now that Republicans are not going to run for office in the midterms. Some staggering amount that's, is the highest it's ever been. And so that's impactful, folks. That's real. That's a real result of them looking at what is happening and saying, screw this. I don't need to spend money to lose, which is basically what a lot of them are saying. They're saying they're retiring. They're going to spend time with their wife, whatever. No, they don't want to lose, and they see what's coming. And part of the reason they see what's coming is because of the protests. So it's not the only thing we can do. It's not the only thing we should do. It's just part of the toolbox that we have in terms of how we bring about change. And I believe that how we bring about change is a combination of protests. It's a combination of speaking out every day in terms of your conversations, in terms of your social media. I mean, I believe it is really our obligation to do all of that if you can. I understand there are lots of people that have other, lots of issues going on, but the majority of us can do that. We can speak out. We can have these conversations. and we can protest, and it is meaningful. We're seeing the consequences of that. Now, there's still so much to be done, but it's really important from my perspective that we do continue to protest. I hope, and we need to figure out how to do it more often. And it's not just about no kings, it's now no war. No war. That really is what we should be now standing up about, because it is the most consequential thing we're looking at in terms of this administration. It's a distraction from Epstein. That's the minor part, honestly, folks, because we're putting American lives on the line. And men and women are dying, and they will continue to die if Trump doesn't just pull the fuck out. So, if he can find a way to say, hey, we won and we pull the fuck out, I don't care. We didn't win. The regime change has been horrific because we've made it worse rather than better. Yes, we've, destroyed maybe their Air Force and their Navy, but that's not, at the end of the day, that's not going to stop them. And that's part of the problem, is that too many Americans don't know what Iran is about, how long they've existed, what their terrain is like, what it would mean if we put boots on the ground. Americans, too many of them don't understand that. They just think we're this monumental, powerful force that we can just go bomb everybody, and that's going to make it, we're going to win. That's not the way it works. It just doesn't. It didn't work in Vietnam, and it's not going to work here. And so that is the reality of where we are also within the war, because we honestly, as Americans, don't know what the fuck is happening. We have no idea if there's really negotiations going on. We don't have any idea if they're successful or not being successful. Trump, lies daily. There is no truth here. And so it's probably the worst situation a nation could find itself in. Going to war without a reason. A war by choice that has no benefit to the American people. And I think that truly is what we need to talk about every damn day. And the other thing I want to talk about is the amount of police brutality that we are seeing in regards to protesters. It is our right, it's our First Amendment right to be out in the street. It is our right to say whatever we want to these guys and women. We can say anything. And they can't respond in a violent way as a result. That's not how this works. Their job is to suck it up and do, protect and serve the population. That's not what's happening in too many instances. And I know there are good men and women of law enforcement. I get that. I know that. I've seen it. I've experienced it. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the side of law enforcement that says, we should have immunity because we're afraid for our lives. In my position on that is, you're not the most, there are far more dangerous professions than being a cop. And that doesn't diminish, in my mind, what you face if you're a police officer or a state trooper or anybody in law enforcement. I have high regard for those people who take those jobs on. But I have high regard for them if they follow the law. They're put in those places to uphold the law, not to, oops, I decided that I'm not going to follow the law and I'm going to demand an ID from you. And if you don't show it to me, I'm going to put you in handcuffs and take you away, even if you're American citizens. That's against the law. And I constantly see videos where cops don't know the law. How are we doing that, folks? How are they don't know what you can and cannot do? Yeah, our programs are the way they're educated so bad that they don't understand the law? Or is it just that they understand the law and they're like, psst, psst, psst. The blue line is more important. Protecting our brothers and sisters is more important than protecting and service. And this, to me, is a foundational problem in terms of our society, because this rule of immunity, of saying, okay, I'm afraid for my life, so it doesn't matter. So an example is Terrence Crutcher. He was a black man, and this was a while ago, probably I think back in 2016, walking from his car, hands up. He didn't do anything. He didn't do anything wrong. He was not armed. He was a big man. And he was walking toward the cops, as he was told to do. And then a female officer shot and killed him because she was afraid all the time while his hands were up. That's not right. That is wrong. And it cannot be allowed in this society. We need to stop this. And this is part of the reason we got here, in my belief, is because we haven't respected everybody's life. We haven't certainly respected, since time immemorial, lives of Black Americans. We haven't respected, in many ways, women's lives, in terms of the domestic violence, in terms of how women are murdered, and how men are often allowed in domestic violence situations to have guns, to murder, and etc. I mean, this is a huge key, in my mind, problem with America. If we don't respect life, then what is the purpose here? Because to murder Black Americans and brown Americans and women and do so with impunity is no way to make any nation great. It makes us the opposite. And so I call on everybody who are seeing this in your state, with the cops, with the state troopers, or whoever sheriff's departments are called in, to make sure that you focus on this, that you make sure your representative knows what is happening and what your expectation is. And the same with the governors of, fuck the red states, that's not going to happen. But the blue states, a lot of this is happening in blue states. What the hell? Why is Los Angeles police allowed to brutalize people? They just did it over this past weekend. I mean, or in Minneapolis or in Memphis. All these things happened where people were brutalized by cops. This can't continue and, have people say, oh, well, you should just obey what they say. No, that is not the United States, and that is not our law. It's not our Constitution. And, people really need to start understanding what is. And the only way they're going to do that is if we continue to speak up and speak out and say the truth. And so I'm going to end on that. Stay focused, stay energized, because it does make a difference, and you can make a difference. Thanks. Take care.